Hello, welcome to the Intersect, where industry, academia, and the DoD meet. Today I'm joined by my colleague Dan Costa. Welcome, Dan.
Matt, good to see you.
Well, thanks for coming. We're going to discuss today insider threat, insider risk, and socio-technical controls. So maybe just a starting question for you. It seems like the insider has been a pervasive threat since the start of computing, right? And although we've made great strides in identifying many specific sources of risk, the insider persists. Can you describe sort of the state of play with identifying insiders, or maybe defining the insider is a better starting point for us, and then maybe build to how we've done recently in identifying those sources of risk?
Yeah, surely. So it's a great conversation starter because by the definition of insider risk, it's always going to be a persistent problem. So I'll unpack that a little bit. When you think about defining insider risk, everyone's got their own different definitions codified via national level policy, what it means to a specific individual organization, and certainly over the years we've established our own definition for insider threat. But the common thread across all of those different interpretations of this is misuse of authorized access to an organization's critical assets. And that misuse of authorized access to critical assets is something that you can't reduce to zero within organizations. Otherwise, you wouldn't have people with authorized access to do their jobs, right? So this is why we characterize this as an enduring challenge for organizations, ensuring that the trust relationships that they enter in with their employees, are done with the appropriate level of monitoring and controls in place that ensure the responsible use of that authorized access. And certainly in the absence of those checks and balances, we've seen private sector organizations, government organizations suffer the consequences of folks who know what an organization crown jewels are and how they are protected, sufficiently motivated and already capable by the nature of their employment relationship, misusing that access to steal intellectual property, conduct fraud, theft of intellectual property, espionage, both economic and national security related, and even kind of unintentional insider threats as benign as clicking on a phishing email or accidentally losing some printed out piece of material.
Yeah, can I ask you to pause there, Dan? So you said something really interesting. So the insider threat doesn't have to be a malicious actor. Perhaps it's the well-intentioned but misguided actions of someone you've trusted with access to something important, correct?
Certainly, yeah. Misuse, brings no implication of whether it was misused kind of on purpose or by accident. Now, operationally, right, what you do to address the potential for kind of intentional and unintentional misuse is very different, right? And over the years, there's been a lot of focus and emphasis on kind of the intentional misuse because, to be frank, it's some of the easiest levers we have within organizations. But as the numbers shake out for kind of the distribution between malicious and unintentional insider risk occurrence, we're seeing organizations take a much harder and closer look at some of the more administrative and kind of people-focused controls that both make our organizations better places to work and then also reduce our risk exposure to people making mistakes.
Right. So it's not, we can't boil this down to the malicious actors in our environments, but rather it's a more complicated question. Now, I know the SCI has been engaged in this research here in the CERT division for quite some time. So I know going back with Dr. Tom Longstaff and Don Capelli, we have a long lineage in this work. I think perhaps before others even took an interest in it. So would you mind, Dan, as the current holder of the title of the person that's most tuned into our insider threat bodies of work, managing those here, maybe give us a quick summary of the lineage of this work.
Certainly, and I've just heard that I need to produce the world's longest business card based on that title. But you're right, Matt. It's been over 2 decades of research in this space. Started with kind of an empirical analysis of actual insider incident data. And what we've done is use that body of kind of actual incident data to gain an understanding of the different types of insider incidents, the typical path of insider incident progression, how that differs for a fraud case versus an IT system sabotage case, and built these generalizable models for that incident progression. so that we can then have an understanding of the vulnerabilities that exist within organizations that enable insiders to carry out these different types of attacks. And now that we have the vulnerabilities enumerated, we spent a lot of time helping to conduct applied research and development in the areas of control efficacy. So what can and should we do about it from a prevention, detection, and response perspective? Now that we have these generalized models, and we certainly have partnered with lots of organizations in the public and private sectors over the last 2 decades to take those generalizable models kind of closer to kind of their specific organizational contexts, learn kind of what insider incident progression looks like in the financial services sector versus healthcare versus the DoD, and then adapt those generalizable models and our control recommendations in a way that is much more organizationally context specific.
Yeah, thanks. There's a lot to unpack in what you've said. Let me start here. So we've learned a great deal over these multiple decades of research, and I should also explain that this is just sort of theoretical research, but applied research, that we talk to folks that have been both the perpetrators of insider attacks and also the victims, which I think is a unique aspect of our research. I was going to ask kind of 2 questions. The first is, do organizations operate a set of dedicated insider risk controls, or is it simply a combination of controls that are arrayed for other purposes that also constitute an insider threat detection mitigation capability?
Yeah, so the answer to that question, kind of interestingly enough, has changed over the last several years, where we saw lots of organizations either on purpose or by happy accident, with a traditional cybersecurity focus, deploying controls that, when looked at through the right lens, could also dual purpose for not only external attackers, but for both malicious and unintentional insiders as well. Understanding the need to contextualize information that we get from parts of our organizations like the SOC, with what we know about the people that work with and for us that can help us truly measure kind of the actual risk associated with some of the activity we would get from something like a data loss prevention capability, has necessitated kind of the need for a dedicated insider risk management function within organizations that complements the sensing and the analytics that you see within a traditional security operations center.
No, thanks, Dan. I think it's really helpful. Over the course of our research, I'm sure we've gleaned lots of important lessons. And I know that one of our sort of seminal publications here, one of the most important elements of our catalog of things that we do in insider risk, is the Common Sense Guide. Can you maybe explain to the audience what that is?
Sure. Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to plug a publication. So the Common Sense Guide to Mitigating Insider Threats is on its 7th edition currently. This is something that really has been a way for us to kind of capture and maintain our body of knowledge in insider threats almost since the beginning. The 7th edition was released this fall, includes 22 best practices that organizations should consider for insider threat prevention, detection, and response. That guide is also a really easy place to access kind of a broad catalog of the actual insider incident summaries and summary statistics information that our organization has had the ability to capture over those 2 decades of work. It also helps to kind of contextualize insider threat program operations through kind of a mapping of our best practices to applicable standards that really run the gamut from cybersecurity to privacy to human resources. And it's got a lot of kind of hooks into where this best practice kind of aligns organizationally and all of the other bodies of research that really we're building on top of, or to put it more correctly, the pulling together and synthesizing.
Sure. Yeah, so the guide, is it intended for any specific audience? What I'm thinking, Dan, is that if you're a very sophisticated financial services organization, or you're a middle market, non-technology focused organization, is the guide equally applicable, or is it kind of skewed to one audience or another, or a specific audience?
By design, we've tried to kind of really run the gamut in terms of organizations that can take value from spending some time with this material. So we can make it as easy for you as if you're working within a small to mid-sized organization, jump to the back of each section and find kind of the best practices that are tailored for small to medium-sized business considerations. If you're only interested in kind of what the HR function's role in managing insider risk is, at the end of every section we have kind of the recommendations and requirements kind of laid out for these different business functions within organizations. And then for the more maturing organizations, really down in the weeds, using some of the summary statistics information to inform some of your risk calculations, and then just diving into some of the reference material that provides hooks out into some of our research that goes into further depth in some of these subjects is another really good way to use the guide.
Thanks, Dan. So one of the things I think is really interesting and unique about this work, and we said it in the intro, is this is socio-technical, right? So unlike something like network penetration testing or malware analysis, we have a strong focus on the human element because the human is the threat actor in this scenario, right? So just could you walk us through what that looks like? What sort of folks do you employ for that work? And we'll get to opportunities here to work as part of the team, but I'm just wondering if you can explain how we draw on other disciplines, maybe in a way that's unique from other more overtly and purely technical endeavors here at CERT.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, early on, there was an assumption or a finding from the preliminary research in this space that really suggested this is a people problem and not necessarily a technology problem. Restricting access is not going to be your panacea for managing your insider risk to acceptable levels. Really what you're talking about is trying to identify and correct the root causes that can sufficiently motivate somebody to, with malicious intent, carry out harm against the organization, or invest in the establishing a security culture and a management culture that kind of reduces the the occurrence of the concerning behaviors and activity that precede harmful acts. So very early on in our research, we partner with and continue to partner with social and behavioral scientists to gain an understanding of kind of the motivations and behind these different threat actors. And it's interesting that when we use the word of threat actors and threat modeling, here's another way to describe an insider threat actor. One of your employees, one of your colleagues, one of your coworkers, the person that sits down the hall.
Yeah.
Right. So that really kind of emphasizes the need to broaden the aperture of the types of solutions and mitigations that we consider, and not just turning off somebody's access or revoking somebody's clearance, but putting better management practices in place, better aligning the support functions that organizations already have with the folks that are demonstrating the potential need to avail themselves of those resources. So it really does kind of fundamentally shift kind of where it makes sense to invest from a controls perspective. And the other thing that we always say in that space that's important to understand is you don't have the opportunity to do this with external threat actors. It doesn't make sense for you to try to retrain or address the root causes for why some APT is trying to break into your network.
There's no redress for their concerns, right? So
it makes sense to do that for your employees, both your full-time employees and your contractors, your trusted business partners.
So in that sense, then we can manage the conditions that lead to insider risk in a way that's unique from external threat actors, and their motivations might be similar.
Sure.
Financial, ideological, right? Whatever it is. But to your point, you have the ability to kind of correct or compensate or resolve the grievance that's leading to that behavior.
Precisely.
I don't want this to get lost in the conversation. One of the reasons we're talking today is because you're looking to expand the team.
Sure.
So could you give us some thoughts about the kind of folks you're looking for and the roles you have available?
Yeah, certainly. And I think I'll finish the thought on your initial question, which I don't think I fully answered, which is the kind of hook between us and social and behavioral science.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And because it goes into kind of what we're looking for within this position. So we do not staff kind of a whole host of psychologists, organizational science. We rely on kind of those bodies of kind of research and expertise kind of in other parts of academia, certainly within the government insider threat programs where there's a heavy concentration of the folks that can kind of contextualize this stuff. As the technologists, we work really closely with those folks so that we can figure out how to scale those resources. Because if you think penetration testers are limited resources, think about the social and behavioral scientists that sit within our security functions, right? An even more constrained resource. So our job as technologists really is to try to help scale those resources as best as possible. So we work really closely with lots of social and behavioral scientists when we're conducting our applied research and development. In terms of open positions that we have right now, we have an opening for an associate position to join our insider risk team. One of the reasons why I circled back to the hook between social scientists and what we do is we're really looking for somebody that can help us, bridge that gap between taking the things that we're looking for from a behaviors, from a indicators perspective, and develop novel prototype capabilities that can make those detections across a variety of different sensor networks that are found across organizations, kind of IT functions, HR functions, and really working to be kind of the technological grease between social scientists and analysts that we see within these kind of these fledgling and fully functioning insider threat programs.
Excellent. So if you're interested, if you're in the audience today, if you go to the SEI website, you can see the career opportunities that Dan's describing. Also, Dan, I don't want to lose this either, that the artifacts we're mentioning, like the Common Sense Guide, that's also available on our website, right, at no cost.
Absolutely.
So, Dan, it seems like we'll have the potential for insider threats and insider risk as long as we have people working in organizations. Now, the rise of automation changes things in that we will see the automation of certain jobs, but as long as we have people in the mix, we're going to have insider risk, right? So my question is, what role does automation play in identifying and mitigating insider risk?
So one of the things that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about, kind of internal to the SEI, is taking what we've learned about how misuse of authorized access by people and the general kind of ways that those incidents progress. Can we take and apply kind of a similar methodology to learning how those incidents took place and what to do from a controls perspective about those different kind of phases within kind of an insider incident? And how do we apply that to conditions where the entity with authorized access isn't a person, but some piece of autonomy? Right? Now, obviously, the behaviors will vary significantly, as will kind of the controls and recommendations. But on its surface, it is another extension of this concept of kind of insider threat, right? It is something that has been granted authorized access to carry out a part of our mission. And that, again, poses a non-0% chance of having that access misused, either by accident or on purpose. Now, my thought would be, for now, hopefully, the by accident kind of part of that equation will significantly outweigh the on purpose pieces until, AI becomes sentient and, wants to do something bad to the people that made it in the first place. But I see really interesting potential parallels between kind of what we've done to model kind of human behavior in terms of these misuse cases and applying similar techniques to autonomous systems.
Okay, so it sounds like we could describe it as a trusted agent, not simply a trusted person, right? And the future is that we'll have, as technology, as automation, as AI takes on roles formerly filled by humans, these same attributes may carry forward, right?
It's going to have significant implications for security operations more broadly, right? Again, one of the things that's going to catch folks off guard is we're not going to be able to use the same kind of response and corrective controls when there isn't a person in the loop. We also will have very different activities to perform when we're trying to get kind of left of boom in terms of kind of controlling the conditions that make a threat conducive environment within organizations.
Right. So both as a force multiplier, as a way to deal with the volumes of information you have at scale, right? That's the positive elements of automation. But automation can also be used because then humans are writing it until code is writing code and AI is controlling it all, right? You could use this then as a tool to engage in insider threat activities.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And I think one of the earliest places that we've been looking for kind of misuse cases is, surprise, surprise, within security operations themselves, where we're seeing kind of these human-machine teams stood up and really just trying to identify kind of the trust relationships between those human-machine teams and really look for patterns in the failure cases between those. And trying to do some root cause analysis to, again, gain an understanding of where we even begin to model this type of problem.
Well, I've got a question that just occurred to me, and I'll put you on the spot just a little if I may. What is the best portrayal of insider threat in a movie, in your opinion?
Oh, it's got to be Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park? What lessons can we learn from Jurassic Park?
Sure. So we've got two-person integrity. We've got, the need to look at kind of separation of duties, and those are some of the kind of earliest and most often, particularly in cases of fraud and theft of intellectual property, kind of examples of kind of systemic organizational vulnerabilities that enabled insiders to carry out attacks. So when we talk about insider threat controls, so many times it's these kind of fundamentals, but it's fundamentals that are broken down when we need information to be shared across one function of business to another. And that's where so much of this got started. Theft of intellectual property by departing employees. Well, what happened there? Access wasn't revoked because, excuse me, HR and IT weren't talking.
Yeah.
So that's a really good example of kind of, the basics from cybersecurity perspective, almost having kind of outweighed importance when we think about this from an insider threat perspective.
Yeah. So, Jan, it seems to me that if you're going to do this kind of this sort of analysis of events within the organization, you're collecting data on people, you've got to strike a balance between privacy and the efficacy of the tools that you're operating. Can you describe what that looks like in this context?
Yeah, it's a very important and delicate dance. So what it really comes down to is having a really precise articulation of the types of activities that you're looking for, and grounding kind of what you're looking for in policy and procedure that dictates acceptable use, acceptable behavior within organizations is the easiest way to kind of start, having those conversations with your legal team, your privacy and civil liberties protection folks, just helping them better understand kind of what you're looking for in the first place, why you're looking for what you're looking for, under what authorities, what you will and won't do with that data, how you'll protect this really sensitive collection of information, and giving them a chance to opine, weigh in, and have their equities represented with respect to, is this legal? Is this, within our organization's already codified policies for the types of data we collect and don't collect? So having those conversations early and often in insider threat program building is critical. Right? We've seen so many organizations get out in front of their skis by getting target fixation on some really shiny object off the shelf that can collect data and analyze data and provide all of these recommendations to managers and security practitioners, but not doing their due diligence up front to just ensure that that type of a collection and analysis is even allowed within the organization or legal in a specific part of the world in which you're doing business. That's a really easy way to kind of really make a mistake within insider threat program operations.
Thanks. One of the things that I think we both enjoy, I'll speak for myself, about working at FFRDC is that the things we do have the purpose ultimately of securing the nation and helping to ensure that we are as free as possible from threats that would affect economic prosperity and our national sovereignty. Which is different than roles I've had in the past when I worked in industry.
Sure, me too.
I know you probably share the sentiment. I was wondering, is there one particular sort of SEI memory that you can share regarding sort of understanding the impact of your work in this space?
We've been really fortunate here at the SEI, to, specifically within the insider risk work, to influence national level policy and decision making that happens about how best to protect particularly classified information. So I think you hit the nail on the head. What keeps a lot of us here, I think we've both now been here for over 10 years. What keeps a lot of us here is kind of the mission and the ability to see the impact of the work that you're doing. And within a relatively high level of autonomy, you have the ability here at the SCI and places like the SCI, in terms of other FFRDCs, to choose your own adventure and find work that kind of interests you and aligns with your skills and the skills that you have and the skills that you're willing to grow. But then, as a part of what our expectations are for working here, you have to be producing things that materially impact national security and national prosperity. So, baked into the expectations of doing a great job at a place like this is this, satisfaction and the ability to see yourself in work that is of national importance.
Yeah, it's a really important point to make, is that the folks we're looking for come from a variety of disciplines and a variety of backgrounds, right? And we really put an emphasis on that, especially in your work where we're not just looking for computer scientists, right? We're looking for folks that have understanding of other factors that matter to insider risk. You have the opportunity here to do things that are of true importance to the nation. And they have a long trail, right? So I think about the work in insider risk, and I think of the things you're doing now that we're still going to be talking about in 15 or 20 years, where you're fundamentally improving the underpinnings of insider risk detection and mitigation. So if you're interested in the audience today in a role here at the SA, please do visit our website and look at our careers. If you're interested in insider risk or insider threat kind of in general, there's a catalog of free artifacts on the website. So as we wrap up here, Dan, first I want to thank you for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation. If you could leave our audience, certainly there's folks here not just interested in the SCI, but maybe interested in improving their insider risk program within organizations. What's one tip you would offer folks today as to how to improve their insider risk capabilities, so both detection and mitigation?
Oh, softball to wrap things up. That one's easy, right? So best practice one in our common sense guide to mitigating insider threats: know and protect your critical assets. And that is not even necessarily unique to kind of insider threat space, but becomes kind of utmost importance when we're talking about protecting those critical assets from misuse by insiders. You go back to the Jurassic Park example, right? Not having an idea of where the single points of failure, kind of our dependencies on one person are. Those things really kind of ramp up the likelihood that that one person can either be co-opted by an external influence, or when some set of unmet expectations presents themselves, does something to carry out an attack. So knowing your assets, knowing your people, knowing the information, knowing your lines of business, that is where insider risk management starts. And then building upon that, an understanding of kind of the need to protect various types of assets from various types of misuse cases, drilling down into kind of a scope for the program that is A, attainable, B, legal and ethical, in alignment with kind of company culture. That's where all of this starts. So know and protect critical assets.
Yeah, and I think that's true of all of information security. But in this context, maybe we could summarize it as understand where your dinosaur DNA lives, then understand the people with access to the dinosaur DNA, then understand the motivations they may have then to divulge or abscond with this stuff, right?
This is way more talking about Jurassic Park than I thought we were going to do, but I'm very happy with
thank you for providing that context. I think it makes this accessible for folks. So thanks again for joining me, Dan. I really appreciate it. And thank you in the audience, and look forward to seeing you in another Intersect.